in the United States, there's a powerful force. It's called the American working class.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is the real balance of class forces emerging.
Yeah.
And it's being demonstrated on the streets and in the protests, in the organization of these commuters, as they call themselves, protecting immigrants, etc. This is the real America.
Welcome to Against the Stream, the communist podcast that cuts through the noise to reveal the true class interests that shape our society. Because if you want to change the world, you need to understand it first. My name is Hamid Alizadeh, and I'm here once again with Fred Weston. Welcome back, Fred.
Thanks for having me again.
In today's show, we'll be discussing the anti-ICE movement in Minneapolis, which has struck terror in the hearts of the capitalist class in the U.S. This will have widespread repercussions, not only in the U.S., but for the class struggle moving forward in the whole world. That will be our main story, but we'll also answer one of the questions from one of our listeners, who is basically asking, how can the communists connect with the broader layers of the masses? But we'll get to that at the end of the show. But first of all, we have had in Minneapolis and Minnesota very tumultuous developments, I think we can easily call it, for the past month. I'm just going to recap what's happened, and then I want to hear your comment. First of all, we've seen a huge amount of ICE, enforcers descending upon Minneapolis. 3,000. I think this is the biggest single Homeland Security operation ever, as far as I understand. They've been grabbing people on the streets, locking them up, preparing them for deportation. But they have increasingly clashed with the local working class. On the 7th of January, they killed a woman, Renee Good, who was a mother and didn't pose any threat whatsoever. It was clearly like an execution, really. That caused a lot of turmoil, caused a lot of anger throughout the U.S., and it really radicalized the whole situation. And the movement against ICE really picked up speed. We saw massive amounts of self-organization, neighborhood committees, signals groups with thousands and thousands of members protecting the community, patrolling the community, and we'll get into all of that. And on the 23rd of January, there was a call for a general strike. About 50,000 people turned up on the streets that day. By the way, that is a huge amount, considering the weather on that day, which is minus, I think, 23. I've been in minus 23 degrees, and it is intensely cold. Thousands of people stay away from work. Thousands of students didn't show up. 800 businesses closed. And this was a huge show of force. And the idea of a general strike began to spread like wildfire, captured the imagination of the Minneapolis working class. And then what happened was, the day after, we saw another killing of Alex Preddy, a nurse, a working class person, a nurse, not an immigrant. The poster boy, you can say, of the American working class, according to, what the conservatives would maybe portray him. And all he did was to film ICE agents trying to grab hold of a woman. And what happened was that they assaulted him, 6, 7, 8 of them. And as he was lying down on the ground, clearly posing no threat whatsoever, they shot him. First, they shot him 3 times. Then they backed away and they shot him another 7 times, if I'm not mistaken. That led to an explosion of anger that night in Minneapolis. And there was barricades raised in the neighborhood that this happened. And if the situation wasn't charged and radicalized enough, that certainly helped to do it. And in the days following, we've seen the Trump administration backing off slightly. the Gregory Bovino, the commander of ICE forces in that area, has been withdrawn. Some other guy has been put in place who's supposed to be a more reasonable or more whatever you want to call it, fair person, more professional person. But nevertheless, it is seen as a step back, and it is seen as at least a partial victory, having checked the Trump administration's onslaught in this field. What do you think is the significance of all of these things?
Well, it's highly significant. What we're living through in the United States is a huge change in consciousness. It's a turning point, I would say, in the class struggle itself, because this is the United States of America that has never had a nationwide general strike in its history, and yet there's widespread discussion about we need a nationwide general strike. That, by the way, must be concerning for the bourgeois. They must be thinking, Trump, what the hell? You're stirring things up to the point where people are discussing this. That is extremely significant. But even citywide general strikes, there's been a few, but the last ones are like 80 years ago. So this is a new development, and I mean, we've had protests. We've had Black Lives Matter. We had the big movement in Wisconsin. We had Occupy Wall Street. All of these big movements. We had the Bernie Sanders development. These were all signals over the years that something was changing in the United States, that consciousness was like moving forward, creeping forward. But then you have moments in which you have a leap in the consciousness. And what happened here is one of those moments. This is a moment in which the accumulated tensions of the previous period have been triggered by the blatant killing of 2 U.S. citizens, not immigrants, not people who were threatening the ICE agents or anything like that. People who were actually out concerned about what these guys were doing to immigrant neighbors they lived nearby, and blatantly killed has radically changed the situation. That is the significance. It is it's part of what Trotsky used to refer to the molecular process of revolution. Which means that for a period it doesn't seem to be taking place. It's happening below the surface. Now it's come above the surface, and it's being seen by millions of people across the United States. And the idea that in order to defend your rights, you need to organize workers and strike and stop production. That means the consciousness has reached the point it's the working class that has to act. This is a significantly important event.
Yeah. I think that is the point here, because I mean, we can say the big businesses in Minnesota and Minneapolis didn't partake in the strike as such.
No.
But the idea of a general strike has been put on the agenda. And I think it's important to say, why is this important? Because, first of all, obviously a general strike is an incredibly powerful thing because it can grind society to a halt. I think our American comrades were saying it in the podcast that I recommend everyone listening to. So, well, ICE needs cars, fuel, bullets, food. If the workers don't provide that, they can't move. So from that point of view, a general strike is incredibly powerful. It's one of the most powerful things that the working class can do against the ruling class. But there's a bigger element. There's a more important thing here, because in a general strike, what happens is that the working class realizes that it doesn't need the bosses. It doesn't need the managers. It doesn't need any of the capitalist class. It can control and run society itself. And when it moves in unison, it is far stronger than the tiny group of parasites that rule our society. So it puts on the agenda the question of power in society. Which class rules? Now, that is a question which is not allowed to be asked. The ruling class will never allow you to ask that. And they do everything in their power, constitutionality and don't you see and theories and explanations and there's hundreds of years of a refined approach to cover that this society can run without them. And now this idea has been put on the agenda, and the seed has been sown. Millions of American young workers and young people and radicalized people who are being radicalized at the moment are looking at Minneapolis and thinking, wait a minute, that's an option.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that the next time there's a big event, a crisis, this will be raised again in one way or another, and we'll see where that will go. It's like Minneapolis has raised the bar, the starting point of just like we can say we had, as you said, we had the Occupy Wall Street movement, which is the early stages of kind of revolutionary process of development of consciousness. Then you had Black Lives Matter, mass movements, mass protests, a lot of self-organization, which has been taken up again by the people of Minneapolis now. And now added to that has been the idea of a general strike. I think that is a very, very profound development. And it shows us the future of the American revolutionary movement. Now, I think it would be good to actually go a bit into detail into what has happened in the consciousness of the people in Minneapolis. Because, again, if the most significant part of this was not the fact that 50,000 people came out, but is what effect did all of this have in the consciousness? One was obviously the realization that we're not isolated. We are many, and we can fight back, and we can check the ruling class. But there are other elements, indications, which I think are important. There's an incredibly good article in The Atlantic called "Welcome to the American Winter," and I recommend everyone on this show to read that article from beginning to end. It's a person who goes to Minneapolis, and he visits these self-organized groups of people who defend or protect their communities, who protect the immigrants, who kind of patrol the streets and make sure that ICE doesn't get a free reign, and that people are protected from them. And I'm just going to read out some of these things, and we can comment on it. One quote. First of all, there's an NGO that is trained 65,000 legal observers, which are basically people like Alex Preddy, who go up to the police, who know their legal rights and limitations, and they, staying within the law, try to safeguard and make sure that the police doesn't overstep the law. It's quite insane if you put it like that. But that's what they're trying to do. And here's what the journalist writes. He says he went to one of these sessions where people were being trained. And he says, I went upstairs to see breakout sessions where people were being trained for direct confrontations with ICE. Inside a classroom, several dozen people ranging in age from 14 to about 70 faced off against 3 trainers playing ICE agents in a loud fracas that lasted several minutes. Afterwards, the trainers offered the volunteers critique. One gray-haired lady said she'd found the exercise difficult, not being a fuck you person, as she put it. Others got tips on how to brace themselves more effectively so that agents could not easily knock them down. What do you think this reflects?
Well, this reflects people organizing to challenge an organ of the state. This is directly challenging the power of the state. And it's not a tiny handful of, extremists, like the way they try to depict the left. These are ordinary people who will probably consider themselves reasonable people, peaceful people, who just want to defend their neighbors, the people who live in the neighborhood. And the fact that tens of thousands of them have taken part in this kind of training reflects the fact that that is a change in consciousness. I need to get organized, to go on the streets, to challenge what is a force of repression of the state, which is armed, which is dangerous, It's brutal, uses brutal methods, but they're prepared to do that. That already, even before these events, even before the killings, is a reflection of a changing consciousness, i.e., we need to do something ourselves. We can't count on anybody else.
Yeah.
That's a huge step forward.
Yeah. One of them, it says to the journalist, says, I don't like confrontation at all. And that's another reason that it's weird I went to the training. I thought this was a very, very profound statement because, there was a caricature of Marxism that says, oh, workers are revolutionary. They wake up, or they're born, or as soon as they get a security helmet on, or whatever makes them a worker,
they think they become born to go on strike.
They become revolutionary insurrectionists, right? But I think this explains the process far more. I do not like confrontation at all. Most workers do not like confrontation, do not like upheavals, do not like violence, and they are perfectly satisfied with actually enduring pain and suffering if they can just go on living a peaceful life. Most workers say, yeah, okay, I'll just tighten my belt a little bit and bow my head. But they expect themselves to at least have a semblance of stability in their lives. That what happens is that the capitalist system repeatedly knocks them down from that, knocks out the instability. Marx explained this in the Communist Manifesto, pulls them down underneath their level of their living standards, and then gradually forces them, drags them out into a situation of confrontation. And precisely the repeated attempt to stay peaceful, to stay out of harm's way, to play along with the rules, to fight, that becomes its opposite. That becomes its anger. That becomes anger, becomes self-organization, that becomes direct action. And this is what we are seeing the process taking place right in front of our eyes here. And it's interesting because he brought with him his 14-year-old daughter. And she says, it was kind of overwhelming, but I don't think it could be too much because they're just being realistic. She's talking about how aggressive the instructors are, right? These guys are preparing for battle. As you say, against the state.
That's right. These people in normal times would not be thinking along these lines, would not be thinking in terms of dedicating their time to training to confront the armed bodies of men of the bourgeois state, if you want to use classic Marxist terminology. They'd be thinking of getting on with their lives, going to work and making a living and enjoying their lives if they can. Here, they're organizing, self-organizing. Now, obviously, they're self-organizing at a certain level. The dangers that the bourgeois, the capitalist class, the rich are facing is that this is just the beginning of a process. This could go much further later on, because this is a response to the brutality of ICE. ICE kills people. That has an effect on consciousness. People realize how brutal this body can be, and they have to organize further. This is dangerous for the ruling class.
Yeah,
because it could lead to the point of not just training to stay within the law, but training to actually how to fight these people.
Yeah,
and I think that's making them think.
Yeah, I'm just going to continue because it follows your train of thought there. It says, the non-profit groups that run these training sessions are not organizing or directing the anti-ICE protests taking place in the Twin Cities. No one is. This is a leaderless movement like the Arab Spring protests. This is what they can, and I think there are lots of similarities that has emerged in a spontaneous and hyper-local way. The people who follow ICE convoys, they call themselves commuters, have organized on a neighborhood basis using signal groups. The man who drove me to the ICE raids I witnessed, a lawyer, activist, and social media figure named Will Sansell, had his cell phone fixed above the windshield of his car, and I could hear people tracking the location of ICE convoys as it passed through the neighborhoods on a signal audio chat. It was like being inside a police car that is getting updates by radio from a dispatcher. Now, when I read this, the fact that ordinary working class people and some of the middle class, obviously, ordinary people driving around, patrolling the streets, keep following ICE, dispatch and having like a dispatch situation where they're communicating this to other people through. This is you can say this is the in the embryonic form, in a germ form, you can say this is a rival force to the capitalist forces of repression. You know, from a Marxist point of view, this state, if you strip it off of all of its accidental features, at the end of the day, the state is the force of repression. It is monopolized violence that defends the property rights of the ruling class. That is what the state essentially is in its core essence. In normal times, we are told that the state is neutral, it works for all of us. But we all know that when it comes to it, the state always falls down on the side of the interests of the rich and powerful, right? Especially when their core interests are at stake. Now, in this movement, we see the early stages of a consciousness developing that this is not our state. Mm-hmm. And in a revolution, when you have a revolutionary situation, what you see is the development of workers' militias, which become a rival, force to the ordinary police and military. And then often, obviously, if it's a successful revolution, some of those will come over to the side of the working class and so on and so forth. So, but in embryo, this is the embryo, a very, very early stage of development of a future worker state in potential. I'm not saying this is where, but that's the fact that this idea is germinating now amongst the American working class and being disseminated by mass media as well as everywhere. Everyone is talking about it. This is dangerous stuff.
It is dangerous for the ruling class because it shows ordinary people that you can run society in a different way. In the interests of a different class. Mm-hmm. That is the dangerous thing. And what has happened here is that Trump has pushed the situation to the limit. He's full of himself. He thinks he can order anybody about. He thinks he's the man of action. He gets things done, you know. And on immigration, he was going to show them how serious he is, you know. But he's ended up terrorizing whole communities. He's ended up actually exposing a side of the state which normally ordinary people don't see. You see, the big effort they've made over decades, if not centuries, is to build up the idea that the state is a neutral body, an arbiter in society, protects people from criminals and gangs, and makes sure that you're safe and all this kind of stuff. And that it's based on justice and democratic rights and all the rest of it. What happened here is the mask has fallen, and behind it, the monster that really exists at the core of the state has appeared for what it really is. And that has been a shocking experience for a huge layer of the population. Basically, millions of people are starting to understand an aspect of the state which we Marxists have always understood. We base ourselves on historical analysis of the evolution of this organism and what it protects. But ordinary people the mass of ordinary people don't look at the state like that, but they're starting to look at it like that. That explains also why Trump, in spite of all his bravado, has been forced to at least to appear to be retreating partially. Bovino's be removed. Yep. The guys responsible for killing Rene Good and Alex Pretty have been sent on leave. Get them out of the picture. Even Trump has even had to make a statement that maybe they didn't follow protocol. This is after saying that they were heroes defending America against these terrorists and all the rest of it. The blatant lying has been seen by millions of people, and this explains also. You know, he talks to the mayor of Minneapolis, the governor of Minnesota, and I can just imagine them talking, or the ruling class in the private, in their private abodes, you could say, talking about this, and they must be saying, "Hey, you're stirring things up dangerously.
Yes.
Back off." Now, I think, you see, what they're concerned about is the general situation of the United States, the position it's in, and the position the American working class, and not just the working class, the middle classes as well, are facing. Let's not forget, I don't know if I raised it in a previous podcast or in a talk I gave maybe on America, something like 63, 64% of the population of America actually considers itself working class. And that is close to the truth in terms of wage labor, people who work for a wage.
Yes.
They're facing a critical situation. If we want to widen the perspective out further, they're discussing seriously a possible crash of the stock markets in the next 1 or 2 years, the impact that would have on the real economy, the impact that would have on jobs, the problem of inflation, all the issues that working class people are facing. And to have given the workers a view of what the state really is, and to have allowed an important layer of the workers to have this experience in self-organization before the outbreak of class struggle over all the issues facing the workers is a very dangerous thing to have done for the ruling class of America.
Yeah. And I think here's a couple of examples. Now we have our comrades in the U.S., the Revolutionary Communists of America, have written an incredibly good article as well, which I again recommend everyone to read. It's called "The Minnesota General Strike: A Historic Turning Point." And there's a couple of very interesting things. Well, there's the whole thing is very interesting, but I'm just going to point out a few. Now, we have some comrades in Minnesota and Minneapolis. We are not big enough to lead a movement like this, but we do have dozens of comrades in Minneapolis, and they've been intervening. One of the comrades called a vigil for Alex Preddy immediately after his death, and 300 people from the neighborhood gathered. He then writes that he says 300 people assembled for the vigil, which began with a eulogy for Alex Preddy and the distribution of whistles before our comrades' introduction about the way forward and the lessons of the 1934 Teamster strike. This was a very powerful strike in Minneapolis in 1934, which we can discuss in the future. But also, I think the comrades have done a podcast about this, which I really recommend everyone to listen to. And then he says, a few minutes into my introduction, one attendee started heckling me, saying, "This is just old stuff that doesn't matter to the situation today." And then it goes on. A couple of other people joined in on these grievances, but then received a large response from at least a dozen others who shouted that history repeats itself and that we have to learn from history. Now again, in a revolution, Trotsky explains a revolution fundamentally. The most important characteristic of a revolution is not so much people taking to the streets and raising red flags but it is the shift in consciousness. The entry of the masses into the sphere of politics. Now, in ordinary times, this is the refined method that you talked about. We have been told that there are people in charge who know what they're doing. And other ordinary people have no say in politics. We don't understand politics. It's too complicated. But what happens in a revolution is that ordinary people raise themselves up from that position of humiliation, really, and begin to realize, no, I have an opinion, and I have a say, and I have a right to that say, and I have a right to know. That's what this reflects. All those people who say, oh, the working class people don't want to know about theory and history. No. Here you have a very profound idea. It's communicated in very simple words. History repeats itself. We have to learn from history.
That's right.
You have whole theoretical works just explaining what these working class people explain in two simple words, right? And I think this is the fundamental thing we're talking about. The shift in consciousness. And the idea that, no, we deserve to know. Yeah. We have a right to know. We have a right to understand.
But you see, in a situation like this, what happens is, I mean, that big demonstration of, they say 50,000. Some people are talking of 100,000. This is not a nationwide protest. This is a city protest. This is a huge turnout. When that happens, the big impact it has, the importance of it is this: it shows everybody taking part in that demonstration looks around and realizes what a huge number of people have turned up. So this is no longer, it's not just me. You know, that's the power that the ruling class have over people. It's like, until there's a movement, you can't actually see the anger and the resentment which is building up below. It stays below the surface, and you can't really see it. Occasionally you can touch it here and there. When something like this happens, suddenly it comes to the surface. Those taking part, their consciousness makes a leap. Yeah. And those that didn't go, but see the pictures, see the videos of, wow, in my town, this number of people came out. It raises it actually raises their hopes that they can achieve far more than they originally thought, that they can actually do something about the situation they're facing. And that is the important, element that's come out of this whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, this goes right to what I was about to read next, and then we will continue from this. But it says, after the comrades opened the discussion, the floor was open. This is the same vigil. The floor was open to any other attendees who wanted to speak. As the comrades relate, and now they quote, this is a report directly from the comrades on the ground. It says, one worker spoke and explained he had grown up trusting the cops, trusting the state and politicians. He continued on, explaining that every single one of these institutions have proven they're against the people. He ended by saying that the only people we can trust is ourselves. This was received with cheers. The confidence, the working class beginning to the raising confidence of the working class in his own powers. Seeing that, wait a minute, actually all of the liberals and all of the sycophants and all of the so-called pundits who claim to be representing us and all the different factions of the capitalist factions trying to vie for our attention, saying, we have your solution, we have your solution. In reality, only us workers together can solve our problems.
That's right.
And we need to rest in the power of us as a class. A very dangerous proposition, I would say.
What's come out here is another America.
Yeah.
The media have been, they go on about Trump. They go on about the MAGA movement. They try and portray an America which is moving in the direction of reaction, dictatorship, semi-dictatorship. What we have here is actually a reaction against that. And what we're seeing is the real balance of class forces emerging.
Yeah.
And when I said earlier on, you know, the overwhelming majority of American people are actually workers. And that is now coming out clearly, and it's being demonstrated on the streets and in the protests, in the organization of these commuters, as they call themselves, protecting immigrants, etc. It's bringing out, this is the real America, if we want to talk about it. And that, it's sending a message to those who participate in the movement, but it's also, Minneapolis is sending a message across the whole of the United States, but far beyond. This is, after all, the most powerful capitalist country on the planet. This is America, which goes around bombing other countries, bullying other countries, grabbing their resources, etc. And what's coming out is actually, in the United States, there's a powerful force. It's called the American working class.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say this sentence by this person, this sums up a revolution. A revolution is when this sentiment becomes the main predominant sentiment of the American working class. We're going to say, we can only trust ourselves. Once that happens, nothing can stop them. Nothing can stop the American workers once they begin to fully rely on themselves as a class. Now, I think we should continue a bit. I mean, there's more we can say, but we can come back to it. If you have anything, you're more than welcome to come back. But I just wanted to, well, go ahead.
Just one little thing. You see, what we've seen is ICE going into a neighborhood, going into a workplace, grabbing individuals, treating them in brutal manner. And even the people doing the observing, limiting themselves to filming it, protesting, but they can't actually physically intervene in the sense of stop them, because, as you said, they're studying how to do it within the confines of the law. This, after all, is an organ of the state,
Yes.
ICE. But you see, the idea that of the general strike, what that brings out is, how can a force like ICE police 50,000 people on the streets of Minneapolis?
They can't.
If it becomes a generalized general strike, they from being this brutal threat, which is what ICE is, it becomes a tiny force
It's nothing.
faced with millions of workers. The organs of the state, the repressive organs of the state, cannot put down the whole of the working class. And what's come out of that's the important thing that's come out of here is, it's not enough just to do the street controlling and all the rest of it. We've actually got to bring the whole working. This is being discussed widely now.
Yeah.
There are even artists and singers and who are talking about the need for a general strike.
Yeah.
It's bringing out that idea, and that we could be looking in the coming period. We can't say exactly when. Obviously, tomorrow there's a call for action. We shall see how strong that is. But it's clear that whatever happens in the short term, the situation is building up to a moment where we could see a general strike in the United States, a genuine national general strike.
Yeah.
That would have a huge impact on the consciousness of American workers. And what's happened here is it's given a foretaste of that. It's actually opened up that is actually a possibility.
Yeah.
That's the important thing.
Yeah. Yes, the consciousness of the American workers is on the march, and we'll be following it step by step. I think we should discuss a bit broader now, because one of the things, this guy said, we can only trust ourselves. And what that implies is we cannot trust any of the parties. Before, there's always been an idea that, Democrats are in power, Republicans become popular, and vice versa. Trump is obviously hated. But this time around, the Democrats, in fact, I don't know the latest polls, but until recently in the polls, the Democrats were even more hated than Trump was. The response of the Democrats to these things has also been quite revealing, obviously. Obama, the great lover of the peoples, he has come out saying that federal law enforcement and immigration agents were not operating in a lawful or accountable way in Minnesota. As in, this is not an attack against the racist deportation, the hounding down of immigrants, or any of that. It just didn't happen in a lawful way. We have to remember that Obama was known as the deporter-in-chief. In fact, Obama, on average, deported more people than Trump has on average. I think the daily average was like 1,000 or something. And I think Trump, so far, is a bit below that. No one has deported more people than Obama has in the past 3 decades. That's a fact. The Democrats have introduced, Chuck Schumer has introduced a bill in order to rein in ICE. This is not about ending raids or ending any of this, but it's about, they need identification and they can't be wearing masks. And so it's kind of like putting back the smiling face. Let's do it in the refined way that we used to, under the guise of legality, right? Never mind that we're attacking the working class, we're attacking some of the most exploited and oppressed workers, while also exploiting them for cheap, which is what the Democrats always have done. But this has obviously repelled thousands of people from the Democrats, and no one really believes in what they have to say. Of course, there are some so-called left-wing Democrats who are saying we should abolish ICE, but this is the main thing. And in fact, someone was saying Kamala Harris in 2020 was talking about abolishing ICE or reining it or reducing it, something like that. This time around, because Trump was getting so much traction on the immigration question, she was saying, "Oh, we need to be tougher on immigration," and the Democrats have been participating in the funding of ICE. There's been a thank you letter to ICE by Congress, which is voted in by with the support of dozens and dozens of Democrats. And it's clear, people can see that actually they have no interest in really standing up for their interests. What they want to do is protect the system as a whole. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, you see, we have an ongoing process here of, it's part of the growing consciousness of American workers, the loss of confidence in both major parties of the ruling class, the Republicans and the Democrats. Trump was able to, at least temporarily, take advantage of this mood by presenting himself as the guy that's going to sort everything out.
The anti-establishment guy.
Yeah, he's the anti-establishment. He's going to sort out inflation and that. And immigration was one of his big things. This behavior of ICE actually flows from Trump's need to show that he's a man of action. He unleashed ICE. He massively increased its funding, the recruitment of extremely dubious types, of course, who were prepared to do what these guys did in Minneapolis. He took advantage of that. But what is striking is how quickly his popularity has actually gone down. He's only been there for a year. He's one of the key things in which he's become unpopular is his management of the economy, which affects everybody. But immigration, which is something that he was still maintaining a certain popularity with his own base, let's say the MAGA base, even there, I was looking at the latest opinion polls, show that he now is unpopular on that front too. 58% apparently disapprove of the way he's dealing with immigration. It's even affecting sections of his own MAGA base. I think he miscalculated. He thought, if I show them just, we don't mess around here, right? We're going to do the business and get rid of these immigrants, etc. It's backfiring on him. Now, the Democrats are revealing the concern of an important section of the ruling class of America at the way Trump is doing it. As you said, they also expelled huge numbers of immigrants, if not more. But they, I suppose they stick the knife in your back as they smile at you. That's the difference. Whereas Trump
with finesse.
Doesn't smile. He growls at you. But what they're actually doing, the essence of it is the same. The problem they're looking at is the Democrats don't have the credibility they had before because of their past behavior, the way they've governed. The high levels of inflation under Biden, for example. But let's not forget that the brutality of the state was also revealed under Biden, under the Democrats. The way they dealt with the Palestine protests, the grabbing of young people brutally on that question. It's not as if the Democrats are the nice guys and Trump is the bad guy. They actually both represent the interests of the same class, the capitalist class at the top. And one of the problems they're looking at is people have no confidence in any of the major parties. I think the fact that somebody like Mamdani in New York, because he appeared almost not to be a Democrat, and he raised issues which do affect people, housing, social questions, gave us a little glimpse of what people really want to see from their politicians.
Yeah.
And they're not getting it.
Yeah. And I think that's what the Democrats are afraid of. In fact, it's not just the whole establishment is terrified of this. Immediately after the killing of Alex Preddy, all of Minnesota's major companies wrote a letter calling for de-escalation. The Minnesota Chamber of Commerce supported it. An association of CEOs, I believe it is, also supported it. There were opinion pieces, editorials from New York Post, sorry, not opinion pieces, editorials from New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal has been quite pro-Trump. But not only that, New York Post, which is the most Trumpist paper I guess you can get, wrote an editorial opening with the lines, "It is time to de-escalate in Minneapolis, Mr. President." And the same with Fox News. They very quickly started changing the tone. And the problem is, they have, for these guys, whether a worker is killed or not, or whether some immigrants are harassed and abused and deported, doesn't matter whatsoever. What they are interested in is to keep business as usual and to keep their system in place and to keep the stability of their system and their rule. Mm-hmm. And what Trump is doing is destabilizing that. We were talking about this before, and I said it's a bit like Netanyahu. The Israeli ruling class don't mind wars against the Palestinians. They don't mind killing and murdering and brutalizing. In fact, they use the Palestinian question throughout the history to kind of cut through the class struggle inside of Israel itself. What they object to is the fact that Netanyahu does it for his own personal gain, and in doing so destabilizes the system as a whole. Now, Trump, it's clear these raids came on the back of a crisis of Trumpism. As you said, prices have not gone down. To the contrary, they've gone up. Layoffs are increasing. I thought yesterday, I think Amazon announced another 15,000 layoffs. The situation has not improved whatsoever on the economic front. Then they said they would be the anti-war party, the peace party. They've been wading into one another, country after another. They've been supporting Israel in the assault on Gaza. And then there was the Epstein case, which caused serious divisions within the Trump base. And they released the files, but not by any means to a satisfactory degree. So it was another convenient distraction for Trump to stay in power, to cut through the class struggle, to divide the working class in a way, but to maintain his own position and to prepare for the midterms, to appear strong and so on. But it's had the opposite effect. It's destabilizing the system. It's raising the idea amongst the American working class that this liberal democracy is not so liberal as we thought, right? Mm-hmm. The truth is, bourgeois democracy is an illusion. Underneath it is the dictatorship of the rich and the powerful. There are laws. Yes, you can have freedom of expression to a certain extent. You can have freedom of organization. You can have freedom of protest until it becomes a threat to the core interests of the ruling class. And they preserve these forces for those moments in particular.
Yes.
What Trump is doing is that he is actually accelerating the process of undermining of those institutions, of the support in those institutions.
Yes. You see, we've said it before. I've explained it many times that you can talk about the state as the armed bodies of men. That's the essential aspect of the state, but it's not just that. You couldn't actually keep down the American working class or any working class simply with repressive measures of the state. You cannot do it because, numerically speaking, the working class is much, much bigger than any state apparatus. And if the working class is mobilized as a mass, there is no state apparatus that can crush them. So you have to keep a grip of the minds of millions of people. You have to sell this idea that there is democracy, that there are rights, that you have your rights guaranteed, that the state is actually on your side, protecting you. That is an important element in keeping things under control. In the workplaces, it's important also to make people think they haven't got any power. They can't actually do much about the problems they have in a workplace. But what is happening here is Trump is stirring everything up and bringing it to the surface, and he's revealing the real nature of the state. At the same time, all these discussions about general strike in workplaces, some places did close down, and people saying we've got to do something. Well, you see, that sets a precedent. Tomorrow, it's going to be about their jobs. It's going to be about their wage levels. It's going to be about inflation. It's going to be about the problems in a neighborhood. And people are getting used to the idea we can discuss these problems and decide what we do about it. Trump has brought all this up I would say it's like a barrel. It's got everything is settled at the bottom. It's all nice and calm and quiet. Trump's the guy that comes and shakes it all up, brings it all to the surface. Yeah. And the other guys are saying, what the hell are you doing? Yeah. Now, he clearly feels, I mean, in spite of, he doesn't appear to me as being a particularly smart guy when it comes to this. But he realizes that he's not delivering on the economy. He's not making life better for people. And the opinion polls, in spite of him trying to brush them to one side, he can't ignore the fact that his popularity ratings were going down after 1 year. And so he's desperately trying to do things that make it look like he's the man of action. I'm going to sort things out. I'm going to do. And the thing is, he's now reached the point, his behavior is having the opposite effect to what he desires. It's having the opposite effect to what, let's say, that section of the ruling class that's been backing him desire. They're having to think the situation through.
And I think also it's not just, you see, what we see now has been primarily sections of the working class who didn't vote for Trump. There has been a shift, by the way. 19% of Republicans believe that these raids have gone too far, right? 61% of all voters. So it's a majority. But what he's doing is not just, you see, there are serious cracks within Trumpism itself. The MAGA movement has been creaking under the weight of social contradictions. Trump came to power. We said this last year, when he came to power, he said he came to power promising to solve the problems of the working class. He will not be able to deliver. And therefore, the same anti-establishment anger that brought him to power, times 100, will go against him sooner or later. Now, it's just been a year, but already we see with the Epstein files, with the cost of living crisis, Gaza, there's a huge division within the evangelical church, which is supposed to be this reactionary bloc. But the lower layers saying, wait a minute, what's going on in Gaza? And the top layers supporting Israel. and there's a battle brewing in there now. On ICE, there was a journalist who was talking about, who was interviewed 8 or 9 ICE agents anonymously. They were before these new recruitments started piling in. They're all Republicans, all right-wing on the political spectrum, you can say. But they were saying, this is not what we signed up for. We just wanted to uphold the law. And yeah, it's in a confused way, and they're not right in the way that they go about it. But they had a class. They think, okay, life is falling apart. They see there's a rise of crime, and they say, okay, well, this is maybe somewhere where we can change things. But this is bringing out, wait a minute, that's not what it's about. And I think the other thing is, you see, Trump is raising political questions amongst broad layers of the masses. That's one of the things that he did that the ruling class did not like when he was coming up and before he was elected. And he connected with the political conversations taking place in the working class. Now, a lot of those conversations he diverted into a reactionary direction. But the fact that those conversations are taking place means people are thinking. They were not supposed to do that. That's what one of the things that the ruling class has refined over decades is, you don't have to bother. Don't you worry your little minds with politics. We're gonna take care of that. And even though for now it's predominantly been reactionary politics, although there has been class issues such as wages and even unionization and so on raised in the MAGA movement, but just the bare fact that these things are being discussed, it means it's not going to be the end of it. Through political discussion, the class nature of all groups rise to the fore.
That's right.
And so what we see here is, yes, a chunk of the working class has moved, and they develop very dramatically in their conscience. But another chunk will join them. And that is what we're looking forward to.
That's right.
That's when we can talk about an American revolution or American revolutionary movement. Once Trumpism starts seriously cracking under the weight of its own class contradictions, the top billionaire reactionaries start moving in one direction and coming into conflict with the workers who didn't vote them in to oppress people or to crack heads, but who voted them in to give them stability, higher living standards, and out of desperation, out of a sense of rebellion, right? And that is a very dangerous thing.
Well, look, you look at Trump's behavior, both inside the United States and beyond its borders. When he was threatening to take Greenland, for example, even by force, the opinion polls showed 71% of the American population was against the use of force to take Greenland. That means that a section of the Republican vote was against. As he moved in the direction of a possible stepping up of the trade war, the stock markets fell around the world. Studies show millions of Americans, working class and middle class Americans, have their savings in the stock market. And they've shown that a significant fall in the stock market would lead to trillions lost by ordinary families, which means consumption would go down. You're talking about a serious economic crisis that could be unleashed by the actions of a man like Trump. We've often said, you see, when the world is on the edge, because that's what it is, economically speaking, we're very close to a serious crisis unraveling. And in a situation like this, even a political event, a political move, which could have been Greenland, for example, you see how Trump had to retreat in the face of that. Now we see it in Minneapolis on a different front, i.e. the big mobilization of the working class in Minneapolis, and he's had to partially retreat. It's actually damaging his image more and more. That the tough guy, the man of action that gets things done, is having to retreat on multiple fronts, both in foreign policy and on the home front. This is inevitably going to affect that layer of the working class that voted for Trump, that looked to Trump. I mean, there's probably still a lot who will give him more time, But again, as time goes by, the fact that he cannot solve the fundamental problems will become clearer and clearer. That's where the dangerous position presents itself for the ruling class of America, because this division, which does exist in the American working class, that there's that layer backing Trump because they lost any hope in the Democrats. But there's that other layer, obviously, which is against Trump, and that's clear in these last few days. There's a potential there for the different sections of the working class to start coming together. And as I said before, it is the overwhelming majority of the population. Yeah. To have such a class coming together as a force is a dangerous thing for the ruling class. Yeah. And the question we have to ask ourselves, though, is how do you win over those workers that have illusions in Trump? You don't win them over with the liberal lefty talk of some of the Democrats, which has no effect on the living standards or the working conditions of ordinary American workers. And it's actually by serious action. For instance, a serious nationwide general strike would suck that layer in. They're also in the workplaces. They're suffering the problems. They've got
raising their demands, raising their economic demands.
It would be a movement which wouldn't limit itself simply to this or that democratic right, which obviously you need to defend democratic rights, but it would bring together the different questions: housing, healthcare, living standards, wages, all of the prices. What do we do about prices? They keep going up, coming out, for instance, for the demand of a sliding scale of wages. Your wages should go up if prices go up. All of these demands, if you bring them together, you could unite the American working class as a force. Yeah. And then you're talking about the beginning of the American Revolution.
Yeah. I think, well, this has been a great discussion. There's one final thing I think we should discuss before wrapping it up, which is in Minneapolis, all of these events happened without the existence of a communist party or a working class party or communist cadres. Of course, we do have communists there. We have very good communists there. But we're a tiny minority in a metro area of 3.5 million. There's nothing. And the same with other groups. Nevertheless, under the impact of events, the consciousness of the working class gravitated towards two fundamental things. One, the idea of a general strike, which in turn questions the right of property of the ruling class. And two, the idea of an alternative state power that abides a different class, right? Alternative, how do you say, to the forces of repression of the ruling class. This shows what Marxists always say. People think, oh, communists want to impose their will on society. But what communists represent is the essence of the consciousness of the workers themselves. All revolutions, left to continue indefinitely, would move towards these two things: the workers vying for economic power and state power, the two main levers of power in society, which are also at the core of the problems that we face today. We'll discuss that in a minute. But you see, this process takes place itself, but it's time limited, which means that before it can reach its end, the ruling class will do all sorts of things to divert it down one path or another, tire it out, diffuse it. It needs a leadership, and it needs a party. And I think there's a last anecdote I want to explain. The role of a party. What is the role of a party? Is it just dictating and telling people what to do? But let's just let the example explain it. This is one of the comrades who is from Minneapolis. It says, he or she, I'm not sure, said, after a long day of political discussions with new recruits, I decided to treat myself with a meal at a local restaurant around a mile away from where Alex Preddy was murdered. As I finished paying my bill, I asked the waitress if they had plans for if ICE shows up, and the answer was yes. She described the protocol that employees and managers had come up with, as well as the security measures that they were preemptively taking. I asked her if she'd coordinated yet with the employees of the neighborhood businesses, and her eyes went wide. She said that was an amazing idea and started brainstorming out loud about the developing communication lines between all of the local establishments so that the workers could all mobilize in the event that ICE shows up. We discussed the conflicting interests of the workers and corporate owners of the on the issue of workplace safety and the ways that the movement could escalate with democratic citywide leadership and even link up with other cities. She happily grabbed our leaflet for herself and her co-workers. Now, I think this really sums it up, because the Marxists, what our strengths come from as Marxists, is that we have studied history. We understand how a movement like this, where it will go and how it can succeed. Not on the basis of what we wish, but on the basis of the objective conditions on the ground. We'll get to question of transitional demands and so on, but one of the things is the organization of the workers on a local, neighborhood, and citywide level to coordinate with each other in terms of defense, strike committees, and actions, whatever actions they want to take. Now, she might have come up with this idea herself sooner or later. The workers there probably would. But you see, the existence of a revolutionary communist can make that process go faster.
Yes.
And that is the whole point about a party.
Well, the point is this. We're discussing a process of a rising class consciousness in the United States. But if we study history, we've seen this happen many times. Mm. The advantages of a party that's based on a theory, which is not it's not alien to the working class. What Marx did was he took the history of the working class, he took the experience of the working class, generalized it, saw the laws that governed the movement of the working class, and developed a theory out of it, and took it back to the working class. as a worked out theory,
Yes.
not just this or that event, but the general picture. And the role of the party is that, and it's also the memory of the working class. I mean, what happened in 1934? We've studied it. There are the texts on it. You know, in 34 in Minneapolis. It was an experience. The history of the American working class itself is full of incredibly heroic struggles of the working class. How many people remember that? How many people have studied it? And yet they went through a process. For instance, the self-organization, the election of committees, action committees, the coordination of different groups of workers. They've done it before.
Many times.
But there's a generation, several actually, who don't remember that. We need to bring this back to the working class today and show them, look, from your own history, this was already dealt with. This is how they dealt with it.
Yep.
For example, there is a big problem here, which is the AFL-CIO trade union organizations. The apparatus of this is extremely conservative. It's generally the case that unions tend to move in that direction. And they are an obstacle, actually, to the widening out of the movement, to the officializing of the movement, to the mobilizing. You need to send people in every workplace to discuss with the workers. You need to organize action committees and coordinate them. And sometimes, if the union is not doing what it should be doing, you self-organize in the workplace, elect a body of delegates and to a citywide committee and start taking action directly while you work on also transforming the unions. That requires a conscious party that intervenes. That's the function of a party. And it's not, as you say, it's not to impose on the working class. It's actually to accelerate the process of the drawing of the necessary conclusions from the experience and taking you to the next level to strengthen the movement.
Yes.
That's the role of the party.
The working class learns through events, through practice, and through experience. But the existence of a party can accelerate that process and draw in, and unify the movement under a joint national leadership, which can use the experiences of each area and to enhance and improve the path of the movement. That's why we are organizing.
Yes.
That is what we're trying to do. So if you're out there listening to this show and you're thinking, I want to be a part of this, and I agree with these ideas, I want to spread the experience of the Minneapolis Revolution, I want to learn the experience of past revolutions. Sorry, I called it Minneapolis Revolution. I guess that's a microcosm of a revolution. But if you want to participate in studying and learning the lessons here and expanding them and using them to show a way forward for the American Revolution of the future, you can find the link in the description and join us. Join the Revolutionary Communists International, the Revolutionary Communists of America, or anywhere else in the world. I think we can end this bit. It's been a very great discussion, but we have an audience question, which I think actually connects very well with what we've discussed. Now, the question we have is divided in several parts. I don't think we can answer all of it. It's require quite a long answer, but I'll read it out and we can discuss it. The person is called Winston Murphy, I think, asks, what are the main differences between Lenin's concept of the United Front and Trotsky's transitional program? And how does the RCP, Revolutionary Communist Party, in the US called Revolutionary Communists of America, implement Trotsky's transitional program? Now, I think we don't have time to go into the question of Lenin's United Front, what that is and how that applies or doesn't apply. But I think the question of Trotsky's transitional program is important. This was a method that Trotsky developed. It was actually developed throughout the history of the workers' movement, naturally from the ground up, so to say. But Trotsky kind of refined it and drew out the main conclusions of this method and extrapolated it. In 1938, in his transitional program. And what he talks about is basically, we know that the fundamental problems of society today is due to the fact that there is a capitalist system where production is social, which means the whole world participates in it, but the ownership is private, which means that a tiny minority of people own the commanding heights of the economy, whereas the bulk of the population doesn't own anything. They can own a house, but they don't own property as such, and therefore are forced to sell their labor power to survive. That fundamental contradiction is at the root of all of the crises that humanity faces today. Hunger, unemployment, barbarism, wars, imperialism, you name it. That is what this podcast analyzes every single week. So if anyone is in doubt, please look at our previous episodes. But the question is this. The solution to all of these problems is the working class must take power. And they must take economic power away from the ruling class, and they must take political power away from that is state power away from the ruling class. They must, in other words, establish their own state, a workers' state, which for the first time in history would be a state representing the majority of the population rather than a minority. But the question is, how do we get there? If we go onto the streets, very few people would agree with you. You put this forward. Most people would think, well, why don't we just try to nudge things in the right direction right here? Obviously, in the course, as people try to live their lives, they're forced into struggle, like in Minneapolis or in other places. They go on strike. And in each of these struggles, in embryo, we find the future, the revolutionary future of the working class. In each strike, you see all of the elements that we talked about today. Who controls the means of production? Who is the lords of the land, so to say? Which class rules? And how do they enforce it? You see that in every strike, in every protest. There's one where... But how do we connect those immediate struggles that are taking place with the bigger struggle? If you go in any strike about, let's say, wage rises or something happening in the workplace and say, the working class needs to take over the means of production and establish its own state, which for the first time would be a democratic state, rather than the fake democracy that we're presented with today. You can't do that. And Trotsky presented a transitional method. Do you want to explain the transitional method?
Well, yes. I mean, if you have members in the unions, or comrade as a shop steward, or is in a workplace, as you said, when there's a problem, the answer to that immediate problem isn't going to be, oh, we've got to nationalize everything. That's my answer, full stop. That is the final answer, of course. We don't deny that. But if inflation is at 10% and your wages haven't gone up for 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to get a mass of workers. They want to fight over that question. The question of the value of the wages, the amount of wages he's receiving. So obviously, we've got to put at the heart of the struggle, if you're going to have a strike in that, it's going to be over that question. It's not going to be over the question of nationalising the commanding heights of the economy. It's going to be over a 10% wage increase. Or if you have a prolonged period of inflation, one of the demands that Trotsky raised was the sliding scale of wages. What that meant was, it's a sliding scale because it goes up as inflation goes up. The workers are not responsible for the rising prices. Why should we have to suffer the consequences? We'd say, let's fight for this. And there have been, workers have won this more than once. The Italian workers had it in the post-war period. They won the sliding scale. How did they win it? It was because of the huge movement of the working class in the face of the high levels of inflation. The bosses actually had to make a concession to the working class to try and calm things down, which shows that the high level of class struggle can actually win concessions from the bosses. So the sliding scale of wages is a way of actually mobilizing big numbers of workers. Another demand was, if there's not enough work, if unemployment is growing in a factory, 10% have got to lose their jobs. The sliding scale of hours. Today we would call it a shorter working week. If there's not enough work for everybody, let's share the work out. Nobody should suffer. Now the question is this: these can seem like quite reasonable demands, actually, to ordinary working people. And they would be prepared to mobilize around those demands and fight for them. What we understand is that in the process of fighting for those demands, they come into conflict with the capitalist class, with their boss.
Yeah.
For instance, if the boss says, I've got to sack a number of you, and they say, no, we're going on strike, indefinite strike, it might even occupy the factory. We're going to have a shorter working week with no loss in pay for everybody. That's hitting the boss. In the process, they will see the way the capitalists respond, and they will start to learn that the problem is actually bigger than just that single demand. It goes beyond that. It's a way of actually helping to raise the consciousness on these questions and raising the bigger picture. So the two things are connected. It's not like only one thing, but we don't talk about national. You raise it in a way that helps to mobilize the working class, but in the process they start drawing conclusions. And what you see if we want to go back to Minneapolis, is we've seen that already happening, right? If you'd have said to the people in Minneapolis 5 or 10 years ago, whatever, we need to organize self-organization in the neighborhoods. We need to have signals. We need to be signal groups. We need to watch the armed bodies of men of the state as they move around the town and organize. They probably would have thought 10 years ago, what are you talking about? It's living experience that has raised their understanding. So the transitional program has a number of demands which meet the needs of the class struggle at particular moments. For instance, it also calls for a workers' militia. Now, you would not be calling for a workers' militia in every situation, but in a situation where you've mobilized peacefully and they've shot at you and killed workers, what seems like an absurd idea one day becomes the most logical demand the next, i.e., organized self-defense of the workers. It flows from the situation. And as communists, we've got to know how to connect with workers, starting from the specific questions they're actually concerned with in the immediate situation, and know how to go from that to the wider picture. And that doesn't come just by reading a pamphlet. It comes from the actual class struggle itself. Workers learn from experience, and fighting for the struggle. Let's put it this way. Without the struggle for reforms, there can be no revolution. I.e., it's in attempting to achieve the reforms that the workers come up against the obstacle of the state, of the whole capitalist system, and start to understand the real nature of the system.
In a way, I mean, the Trotsky explained it as demands that lead the workers beyond the confines of the system. I mean, we can say in Minneapolis, you have constitutional, the Constitution, the defense of the Constitution. A lot of workers want the Constitution and the law to be upheld.
Yes.
And you see this legal observers, for example, but actually they come up against the limits of capitalist democracy, which then, with the kind help of communists and their bitter experiences, will take them beyond the system. That, hey, wait a minute, we need a different type of democracy. Fundamentally, the final program of communism is what? Is the expropriation of the capitalist class, the nationalization of the commanding heights of the economy under the democratic control of the working class, the establishment of a new state, a workers' state, with its own militia or armed bodies of men. That is the final program, we would say. The point is to make bridges that connect the immediate situation with that. And in Minneapolis, we see again, workers patrolling the streets. Well, surely that is already becoming a formalized thing, but shouldn't that be then organized and connected on a broader network with under the control of the democratic councils of each neighborhood? Well, and then connected, which should also participate and take the lead in organizing a general strike. Well, these things immediately point in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
They point towards, in the relying on your own forces, the potential of in the future creating an alternative state, dual power situation, an alternative state structure, all flowing from the actual situation on the ground. But obviously, there's no checklist. Developing a transitional program, a transitional demands, is something you have to do on the ground. We know what the needs of the hour is. We know the objective needs, but they need to be connected with the conditions and the consciousness on the ground.
In the United States today, a wide layer of the workers, and they're discussing this question of a national general strike.
Yeah.
Now, when exactly that will materialize as a fact, we can't say in advance, but it's moving in that direction. Now, what do? We've been calling for that. This is the answer is a nationwide general strike. But let's say we get to the day where that actually happens. It materializes. Millions of workers are on strike across the whole of the United States. The question is then posed, what next?
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
And we understand that such a general strike actually poses the question of power.
Yeah.
Who
Rules.
governs? Who rules?
Yeah.
Here we have the working classes mobilized, capable of running society in a different way. We either move forward and actually break up the existing state and build a worker state, or you've got to step back and then the ruling class regains control of the situation. But that's what we're moving towards.
Yeah.
The discussion about a national general strike is posing that scenario in the not too distant future in the United States.
Yeah. I think that's a great kind of way of summing up the whole discussion that we've had today. Just to say that final comment for me, at least, is the transition program is incredibly important for the communists to connect with broader layers of the masses who do not see themselves necessarily as communists, by fighting around concrete demands of the hour and showing how they cannot be solved within this system. But in order for the communists we train ourselves in this program, we train ourselves in this method, and every time we go out, we educate ourselves in how do we present. And this is an art. It is not a formula. However, we also have to say, at this stage, we are far too small to play that role of connecting with the broader movement, of leading that movement, of leading a nationwide general strike, which would pose the question of power. So therefore, the transitional program is not our main emphasis, in a way. A lot of times today, the people that we are aiming at are people who already have had enough with this system, or who are very close to doing that. Because why? Because those are the people who are ready to join a communist organization as it is now. That's not the majority of the working class. But in building a critical mass, a core of people, the most radical elements, the most far-sighted, politically far-sighted elements, organizing them, we create a critical mass which allows us to be heard and to have a presence. This comrade in a cafe, it was just one comrade, and he made this waitress have a leap of consciousness within a very short conversation. Imagine having a comrade like that in every workplace, in every school, in every university.
I can quote an example. When I joined our organization as a teenager, in the town I was living in, we had a comrade who was a shop steward in a metal factory, metalworking factory. Through the strikes they'd organized, they'd achieved actually the highest wages in the industry in the town. Yeah. Right. It was because of the advice of the branch of the organization to this worker comrade that helped him to achieve that. Yeah. And I remember he used to sell 35 papers a week to the workers in that factory. What he'd achieved was actually a real victory, but it was thanks to our influence and our advice in how to go about the strike, which then widened the number of workers listening to our ideas. Yeah. that's what every comrade in a workplace should be working towards in the future.
Precisely. And the point is, if we have this in every major workplace, in every school, in every university, then our transitional program and our transitional demands will have a major impact.
Yeah.
Right?
And the party is strengthened through the process.
Precisely.
Well, I did a reading of American labor history. And I know, for instance, the longshoremen strike in the 30s it was, and other strikes. Some of the most important victories were achieved where there was a core of politically conscious workers, communists or socialists, consciously working to help the outcome of the strike.
Yeah.
It shows that it's the validity of having cadres, educated cadres on the ground. On the one hand, it strengthens the workers' struggle itself. Yeah. Two, it strengthens the position of the party within the working class as a whole, because the aim is obviously to build a strong workers' party, eventually to lead the whole working class in transforming society.
Those are the best words to end with, I think. Thank you very much, Fred. Thank you for this conversation. And thank you for all of you guys out there for tuning in. We will be back next week. We have a special episode, which we already recorded because we'll be away for a conference. But there will be a special episode about the Venezuelan revolution and how we went from Chavez to Maduro to the situation today. And then we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time with the business as usual, Against the Stream. Thank you very much. My name is Hamid Alizadeh. This was Fred Weston. Thank you.